Wouldn't it be amazing if you could learn a language effortlessly without having to memorize long lists of vocab or do those boring language drills that they make you do in language class or study grammar? Well, I got fluent in Japanese quite quickly without doing any of that. And I'm here to share my lazy method so that you can replicate it in ways that work for you in your life and your circumstances. So, first of all, I should say that I'm only talking about conversational fluency, which is quite separate, I would say, from getting advanced level Japanese, which you have to do with a lot of memorizing and a lot of study. Sorry, but you do. I mean, if you're talking about reading and writing. But I did do that, but in a very relaxed way. But I mostly soaked up the language like a sponge. And here's how I did it. So it was a unique set of circumstances. I was working in a school. This was my first school, my first job after university actually. I was in a school from September to December, and I started off that year with very little Japanese. I knew a few words to introduce myself, and I could say, like, what's this in Japanese, what's that, because those are really good words to start off with, especially if you're living in the country. Those simple words and phrases that you're going to use a lot. The uniqueness of this situation is actually really quite cool, because I ended up living in Japan for 3 years, and this was the perfect start for me. The teacher that I was assigned to work with, and there was only one, by the way. Normally in other schools that I went to later on, I had 2 or 3 different teachers that I was going to work with, and I would do the English bit and they would sort of do the grammar explanations and that. But the unique thing about this situation was that the kids that I was teaching were straight out of primary school. They were 12 years old. I only taught the 12-year-olds. I didn't teach different ages in that school. And so I taught a lot of classes over and over again, because there were 5 different classes in each year, and I only taught the 12-year-olds, so I taught every class 5 times. So what did we do? I basically chatted to the kids one by one around the room, and then we did group exercises and stuff, but it was a lot of me talking to the kids in really simple English, okay? And my co-teacher would repeat back what I'd said in Japanese so that the kids would understand, because they had no English before that. They were like, this was literally their first time learning English for most of them, and probably the first time they'd met a foreigner as well. So every day I would hear my own words parroted back to me 5 times. And wow, the repetition is so powerful. The unique situation in that classroom, I was in my first job straight out of uni. Those kids were in their first classes in secondary school, the first time they were learning English, and the whole atmosphere was fun, relaxed, and it was all about connecting. Like, I wanted to get to know them, they wanted to get to know me, so we were just chatting. It was really just conversation the entire time. And I was deeply curious about what I was hearing my teacher repeat back to me. So I was, the first time I'd hear it, I'd maybe catch 1 or 2 words. The second time I'd catch a few more. And by the end, by the 5th time that I heard it, I would be able to kind of say it myself in my head. I knew what my teacher was going to say because I'd already heard it 4 times. I think another thing that's super important is that I was doing this Monday to Friday, so it was part of my daily life. Most of my days were immersed in Japanese, in a simple form of Japanese as well, tailored to these 12-year-olds. So it was perfect for me. And by the end of that 3 months, they massively improved their English. And my Japanese was just like, whoa, really internalized. Okay, I did do a few other things that helped me learn. I was living on my own at the time, so I had little notes all around my apartment. This is the sink, this is the tap, sink, bathroom, toilet, whatever. And I put them in Japanese. So I made it part of my daily life to be soaking it up without having to make too much effort. And I think that's the key. We have to cut out all the resistance as much as possible, because if we have to sit down and do our language practice, unless it feels really joyful and we really want to do it, there's always going to be some resistance. It's something that we want to do because it's good for us. And we've all made New Year's resolutions that we never stuck to because that initial intention often falls by the wayside because we don't want to start. But it has to be interesting to you. This was interesting because of the human connection, I would say, because of the situation I was in. So how can you copy that for your language learning? The human connection is everything. Those kids were awesome, and I really wanted to connect with them. Another thing that was useful was the repetition was so key, because we need to hear things a lot of times before we can actually say them ourselves and come out with them and produce them. So if you can find things, this was in the 1990s, you kind of had to go to a country to learn the language in those days, unless you had those Rosetta Stone tapes, which I actually never had, but I guess that's another way you could have done it back in the 90s. But now we're in a completely different era. We can just pop in our earphones and listen to native speakers. So that is a massive part of it that's been taken away. It's made so much easier for us. I was talking to a linguist from Norway the other day, and he said something that really made me kind of understand this on another level. I said, oh, you guys are real natural language learners in Norway, and in Spain, in Britain, in Japan as well. There's this kind of block to language learning, and my theory is that it's because we make it all about the theory and the learning and the grammar, when actually it just has to be something that we live and experience with all our senses and with all our emotions. And he agreed, absolutely. But he said, do you know what? Norwegians actually aren't amazing at languages. We're amazing at English, because it's kind of hard not to be good at English in Norway. Because if you want to watch a film, it's in English, it's all over the telly. So it's kind of impossible not to be good at English. And I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that, but that gives us another level to work with, right? How can we make it impossible not to learn? So we can change our environment, we can do those, put little notes around our room, we can leave a book by our pillow if we want to. We really want to learn through reading, if you love reading like I do. That's a great way to soak up a language effortlessly. Find ways of bringing it into your day that make it really effortless. So doing things that you're already doing, start to pair your language learning with something else that you already do as a good habit. So maybe you exercise, maybe you have a commute or the school run in the morning, in the afternoon. These are all great times to just pop on the radio or stick on a podcast, listen to a YouTube video, anything that will get your ear used to listening to your target language. Because at first it won't feel normal, and it feels hard, you'll only understand a few words, and most of it goes over your head, but that doesn't matter, because you soon start to just pick out words, and then you start to pick out more words and see how they all join together. And eventually, and if you can read at the same time as listening, that's another great tip, because it reinforces it a lot quicker, especially for languages. Like, I was chatting to a Portuguese learner the other day who said it was really, really hard. And I actually found Portuguese really easy because it's so similar to Spanish. But if your ear isn't used to listening to Portuguese, it sounds like Russian or something. It sounds so, I guess, impossible at first. And that's probably the case for most languages. Yeah, I definitely went through that with French when I was a kid as well. I've gone off on a massive tangent. I'm going to delete this video and try again. Bye.